Welcome to Tell Me Your Radio Story. This is my video podcast where I ask radio professionals, how did you start in radio? What was your journey and where you are now? And I have both radio and TV star Jason Lee on my podcast. I've known him for a long time, so I could say that. So tell me the very beginnings of your radio story.
Well, I think I'm a lot like you. I knew almost from the time that I could talk that I wanted to be a broadcaster. I mean, you're the same way, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I was one of those kids growing up. You know, I would pretend like I was being a radio DJ talking up songs, or, you know, I'd watch a baseball game and hold a pencil as a microphone and do play-by-play. You know, I knew I wanted to be a broadcaster. So, this was 92? Yeah, 92, I guess. I'm a sophomore at Penn State Abington. I get an internship at a little AM radio station that played oldies. The Geeter, Jerry Blavitt. He had a radio station. I got an internship there, and after interning for 4 months maybe, they put me on the air. They gave me a weekend shift. It was the kind of station where, I mean, it was a great station. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean to disparage it, but it in the ratings, it didn't do that great. So, you know, to put a guy like me on, and the Geeter, I guess, saw something in me, which I'll be forever grateful for. He put me on the air, and that led to a full-time job. After being there for 2 years, I sent tapes out to every radio station in the market. Only one called me, and it was B101.
You were Jason the Music Mason. That's what Jerry Black.
Well, you know, look, Jerry, you know, the Geeter with the heater, you know, he likes rhymes. And
yeah.
Listen, I would have called myself anything if he let me go on the air, you know. And again, I'm eternally grateful to the guy. Almost 30 years later, every time I see him, it's like, listen, man, it all started with you, and I appreciate it.
Now, I don't know if you know this. I think you do, but besides sending the tape to B101, there was a video of you, Art Volo, who's the
radio's best friend, right?
He videotapes everything, and that was what I found out about you first, besides hearing your tape, because Eric West, who was the afternoon guy on B101 at the time, he said, Dan, I want to show you this guy. And I said, yeah, he's good.
You know what's funny? And I appreciate you saying that, but I got to be honest with you. I cannot believe that anybody watched that video or heard my demo tape and thought I was good back then. Because...
Hey, you caught Eric's ear and eye, and you caught my ear.
And the thing about that tape, you talk about being in the right place at the right time. So Art Volo was at the radio station to film the Geeter, to put him on, you know, to add him. For people who don't know, he basically, he travels. I don't know if he still does it, but he traveled around. Is he still alive, actually, Art Volo? Do you? Okay, good.
I think he is,
but he traveled around the country, and he would film DJs on the air. And guys like you and me couldn't get enough of that stuff. So he was there to film the Geeter, and I came on the air right after. So Jerry wrapped up his show. I'm getting set to do my first break, and Art still, you know, he still has the stuff hooked up. He's like, why don't I just film your first break? I'm like, okay. And you could tell watching the tape, I'm a nervous wreck because I know that this guy's filming this, and people all over radio are going to see it. But yeah, it's still floating around YouTube somewhere.
Oh, hey, people who are radio geeks like you, me, Eric West, he liked that. And again, I was hanging out with him, and he said, Dan, this guy sent a tape in. I want to show you him on video. And I said, yeah, he'd be good. Bring him in. So you started at B101 part-time.
I did, yep.
And what shift? I don't remember now. What shift did you start?
It was various weekend shifts. It was a lot of Saturday and Sunday afternoons. But you know, basically, I didn't really have a regular shift. It was just wherever they needed to plug me in. Look, I was just glad to be there. I mean, you know, that station, especially from where I came from. I came from a little AM radio station. All of a sudden, I'm on, you know, one of the biggest stations in the market. I mean, it was pretty cool. Yeah, but I started there part time. Should I tell the story? You know where I'm going with this, right? Should I tell the story?
Go
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know what you're going to say.
Dan and I have, look, we've known each other for God knows how long, well over 25 years at this point. So you know this story.
Yeah.
So the guy who hired me, and I guess the guy who hired you, Mark Hamlin, right? So
Yeah.
Mark Hamlin leaves the radio station 3 months after he hires me. He goes back to Detroit, which is where he was from. So they bring in this guy, Jim Ryan, who I know radio people will know that name now because he's done amazing things in the past 30 years. But he came to B101 from Portland, Oregon, I think.
Portland, Oregon.
So, and Jim was a workaholic. He was at the station on Saturdays and Sundays printing out logs. Even that dates us, printing out logs, right?
Yeah.
So he comes in the studio. Can I say one curse word on your podcast, Dan? Okay.
Go ahead.
He comes in the studio. You can bleep it out if you want. He comes in the studio and he says to me, and I quote, direct quote, he says to me, "You sound like shit." And he walks out. Now, at the time, I'm mortified, but I got to be honest with you. Looking back, he wasn't wrong. Because, listen, and the reason I say that is because, so I'm coming from an oldies station, and, I was a 19-year-old kid playing oldies, and I guess I felt like I had to sound older, so I had a very phony delivery, very announcer-ish type delivery, not natural at all. And I think that's what Jim meant. So, I mean, I wish he would have put it differently, but that's what he meant. So he says this to me, walks out. I'm mortified. Meantime, I still have to do the rest of my shift, and I'm mortified. After avoiding the guy for 2 weeks, he calls me up, and he says, "We need to go over a tape now." So, again, we're dating ourselves. It was a cassette tape. I bring a cassette tape to his office. He pops it in. He's listening to a few of my breaks, and he gets to me doing the weather, and there I am, Mr. Announcer Man, sunshine today with a high of 85. And then he stops the tape, and he says to me, "All right, Jason, you're on the air doing the weather. What is, give me the weather like you're on the air." So I go, "Sunshine today with a high of 85. He says, "Okay. Now you're just talking to me. We're having a conversation. What's the weather?" I said, "Well, sunny with a high of 85. He said, "Say it like that on the air." And that was my epiphany. And long story short, he let me grow. He let me get better. He kept me in place on the weekends. And the first full-time slot that opened up, he gave it to me. So I'll always be grateful to him because I made an awful first impression, but he gave me the chance to change that. So he's a good dude.
Everyone has their perspective on what they think people should sound like, and people differ, and people that are probably watching this video podcast right now who are radio people are saying, "Yeah, I've had that happen before. One woman or man told me I stunk, and then later I got to great heights and somebody else that told me this or that." It's very subjective. Radio is very subjective.
No doubt.
Hey, he gave you criticism. Maybe it was not in the most constructive way.
No,
He was very blunt, like, "Hey, kid,
Yeah,
you
right.
suck." So your credit, you hung in there. You could have cried. You could have said, I quit.
Well, listen, honestly, don't think I didn't think about that. But then again, it's like, okay, I finally got to B101. I'm going to quit now after 3 months? No, I can't do that.
So you start overnight, and how long were you on the overnight time frame?
Overnights was it was kind of off and on because I started overnights in February of '96. It was like 2 days before my birthday. Is when Jim gave me the full-time shift. It was a great birthday present.
Yeah.
So that lasted like 4 years. Then by that time, Jim Ryan had already gone to New York. Chris Conley came in to program B101. And Chris wanted to add a producer to the morning show. So I guess I was was I tracking overnights at the time? I think I was tracking overnights, but I was the morning show producer. So I was working with Chris and JJ at the time. And
Yeah.
they were great, and we all got along great. And they eventually started incorporating me into the show as like a third wheel, and I was going through a lot of relatable things at that point. I was getting married, just a lot of life things that are relatable to the typical B101 listener. So they were bringing me on, making me a part of the show. That only lasted a couple of years. There were a couple of things in play. We had another competitor come on the air. Sunny 104.5 came on the air. And, Chris wanted to scale back the talk. So he took me off of the mornings and put me back on the overnight. So off and on, I was doing overnights for like 6 years. But there was a brief morning stint in there too.
And after Chris and JJ were no longer with the station, did you still do anything in the morning? Or
I'm trying to think.
with Tiffany and Michael?
Oh no.
No.
By the time I was already out of B101, Chris McCoy was still doing mornings when I left B101. I left in August of
because it was Chris
right.
And
It was
Tiffany
Chris and Tiffany.
For a little while.
So I left in August of 2006 to go to Ben FM.
Okay. But you never know who you might work with again, and we'll talk about that with Chris McCoy in a little bit. So you're at Ben FM, and what time were you on there?
So at Ben FM, they hired me as the morning show producer and kind of like the sidekick on the air. But then it was weird. Like a month after they hired me, they got rid of the morning guy. So, okay, the guy that I was hired to work with, he's not there anymore. Dave Cruz was on the staff. They made Dave Cruz the morning guy. So all of a sudden, I was like Dave's sidekick. It was, it was his show, but I was kind of like his sidekick. Then they eventually brought in Marilyn Russell, and it was Dave and Marilyn, and I was the producer, and I was the traffic guy. So it was a lot of fun. And then, if you recall, and Ben is still like this actually, we had a morning show, but then that was it. It was jockless throughout the rest of the day. A program director named Jules Riley, who I thought she was fantastic. I loved her to death. She came in, and she wanted personality throughout the entire day. Personality on the radio, go figure, right? So she split us up. So Marilyn got the morning, I got midday, Dave got the afternoon. It didn't last as long as we had hoped, but that's what happened.
So from Ben FM, where do you go from there?
Well, I left Ben FM. Let's just say it wasn't my choice.
You weren't escorted out by
No.
security,
So what happened? So I was doing midday, okay?
Yeah.
And they basically realized, at least what they told me was, the ratings that they were getting in midday were not enough to justify, compared to what they were getting without a jock. It was not enough to justify paying for a jock. So
Yes.
I don't agree with that. I mean, there were times where we finished third in the midday. Now, granted, it was during we were giving away money. It was a money giveaway, but the potential was there to have an audience in midday. Sure. So I'll never forget this. May 19th, 2009. I'm going into what I think is an air check with my program director. I walk into her office. John Fulham is in there, who was the market manager for Greater Media.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I walked into the end of their meeting. So I'm like, hey, John, how are you? Give him this big hello. All of a sudden, my PD gets up and shuts the door, and John's still in the office. And that's when it hit me. So, oh, great. Okay. I'm getting fired. So, but the cool thing is, so I got fired by Greater Media Philly. My next stop, I got hired by Greater Media New Jersey. So the same company hires me, which was, I mean, look, I knew it wasn't performance-based why I got let go, but that kind of reinforced that notion. The same company hired me. And like you said, you never know who you're going to end up working with again. I got hired to work with Chris McCoy, who I worked with at B101. I got hired to work with Chris McCoy at WMGQ, Magic 98.3 in New Brunswick. He was the morning guy, and they were going to simulcast his show on Magic 98.3, and their station in Toms River, or I guess Manahawk in WJRZ, they made that Magic 100.1. So Chris was simulcast as the Magic Morning Show, because both stations were called Magic. So I was hired because of the simulcast to work with Chris. And same deal as the other morning shows. I was kind of like his sidekick as well.
And how long did that go for at
Well,
MGQ?
So there were a lot of technical issues with how the show got delivered to JRZ. JRZ, and I don't know why, because honestly, Dan, all that stuff's over my head. But they would lose our feed. They would have a lot of dead air. So we didn't really build an audience down there because they'd listen and, all these technical glitches. So we didn't really build an audience. So they decided to pull the plug on the simulcast. And when they pulled the plug on the simulcast, there went my job. That was the only reason they hired me. So they pulled the plug, and they I guess that's when they made Glenn Kalina the morning guy down there. So yeah, so it only lasted like a year or so, but that's when I got back into TV. Right after I got let go from MGQ.
So how did you hear about the TV stuff and got into that?
I think I stumbled across it somewhere. Because you know how it is. I mean, when you're looking for work, you're on the computer all the time. It's like your job is to find a job, Excuse me. So I saw that they were having auditions for this new traffic channel called Tango Traffic. And they were going to be held at Channel 17, PHL 17. And they were open auditions. So I went and I auditioned, and they hired me.
And were they still broadcast from 17, or they were at a different location?
Tango Traffic. We were broadcasting on one of PHL's sub channels, but our physical studio location was in Malvern. It was nowhere near Channel 17. But the auditions were held at 17.
And what time were you on doing traffic?
I was the morning co-anchor, so 6 to 10 a.m. And, the channel didn't last, and I still say I think that concept can work if it's done right. I mean, obviously, 24/7 traffic, like nothing but traffic info, probably not the most entertaining thing. But in the morning, certainly. And then throughout the day, I think, you mix in the traffic information with other type of features that would have made it a little more fun. I think, had they promoted it better and done some different things, I think it could have lasted, but yeah, it didn't. It didn't. But Tango is what kind of landed me back at PHL 17.
So 17 knew that you were on Tango, and then what job materialized at 17?
Well, it's funny, and again, this goes back to you never know who you're going to work with again. And I tell kids this, and, my son just turned 18. I tell him this now. It's like, you never burn any bridges because you never know when someone is going to call you back. So back in the early 2000s, when I was full-time at B101, I started dabbling into some part-time TV, and I ended up working what at the time was WB17. I freelanced doing the weather there. So I worked with a name I'm sure a lot of people know, Steve Highsmith. He's long since retired. He hasn't been on the air in a while, but he was a pretty big name in news in this town. Of course, hosting the Mummers parades and all that. So I knew Steve from years ago. Steve was the news director at PHL 17. I mean, this time around, my second time around, he's the one who hired me back. So they were starting to rebuild a news department there, and he had me in mind to produce the morning news and do some stuff on the air. And he called me out of the blue one day, and he's like, "Listen," he's like, "I don't have anything right now, but this is what I have in mind." And then we kept in touch, and this went on for like a year. Finally, after a year or so, he calls me. He's like, "Listen, The job's open now. You want it? It's yours. And at the time, Tango Traffic had morphed into a company called Geo Traffic, was off television. It was all audio updates like on apps and things like that. And the company was hanging on by a thread. So the job came along at a great time. And I've been there ever since. My job there has evolved into doing different things. I did full-time weather for a while. I'm back to doing more producing. I started a web show. I mean, it's given me a chance to do a lot of cool things.
Let me talk about that web show, because you have been interviewing some incredible people, and I want you to touch upon that. And where can everyone watch these people?
So the show is called Legends of Philly, and it's on PHL17.com. Basically, you go to the station website and you click on Morning News, and there's a drop down, and you'll see Legends of Philly. We've only I haven't been cranking out as many as I want to, but the ones I've done, I'm really proud of. Did Bernie Perrant, Flyers legend, Larry Boa, Phillies legend. Who else did I do?
Wait, did Bernie Perrant let you drive his boat?
Well,
or he's like, sorry, Jason, we're going to just
the thing with Bernie, the only reason I got to know Bernie was because years ago, when I was doing the weather full time, every Friday in the summer we would go down the shore. So this one Friday we were in Cape May, and I'm always looking for fun segments and fun things to do for these short segments, and I stumbled across Bernie Perrant had this fishing event that benefited the Ed Snyder Youth Hockey Foundation, and I know Bernie's passionate about that. So I contacted, I emailed his website, and his wife got back to me. So we did a couple of live hits on his boat in Cape May. So and we've kept in touch. I mean, I guess I could say he's a friend, which is pretty cool. And when I thought about starting this show, who better to make your first guest on a show that's about legends than Bernie Perrant? So he was my first guest. And
is his boat called Kick Saving a Butte?
No, yeah. It's funny. His boat was called the French Connection, but his wife is Italian, and so now it's called the Italian French Connection. He changed the name of his boat.
Gotcha.
But we did Maury Povich because I'm old enough to remember Maury Povich worked in Philly locally. It's not just the fact that he's on our station. His career, he will tell you, Philadelphia is the reason that he became a huge star nationally.
He is the father. You are the father.
He's told me that. Who else was there? There was oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank now. Who else did I talk to? Craig Shoemaker, the comedian. I talked to him. I just taped a couple. I did one with Mike Missinelli and one with Larry Anderson. So they'll be up in the next few weeks. So it's been fun.
Very cool. So there are a lot of cool things that you've done, both related to TV and radio, and we talked about this on the phone the other day. So give me maybe the top 5 things really that stand out in your mind, like, wow, this is so cool because I was on the radio or on TV.
Okay. Gosh. Well, there was one that you and I talked about. We were in a, and I use this term loosely. I hate the, quote unquote, celebrity treadmill race. It was, I guess it was radio and TV people. It was, so we were on the team from B101, and the treadmill across from us, it was by Sikahema.
Yeah, and Vi's a world-class.
Yeah, and
we're racing against world-class.
It's like, that's not fair, That's not fair.
We were trying to unplug his
this guy's a pro athlete, and I'm here 30 pounds overweight trying to, huffing and puffing on a treadmill for 5 minutes, But that was cool. And actually, I don't know if I ever told you about this one, Dan. 1997, Chris Conley, program director, B101 at the time, sends me to New York City to the Grammy Awards, which were that year at Madison Square Garden. So, cool. and he gets me backstage passes because what he wants me to do is he wants me to try to record as many artists as I can saying, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and you're listening to B101." So, they made a B101 mic flag for me, and I'm holding this microphone, and I'm waiting to, just to run up to people and say, "Hey, can you say I'm so-and-so and you're listening to B101?" So I got Gloria Estefan, and I got Celine Dion.
Nice.
And then the Grammy people tell me, you're not allowed to do live interviews backstage. And I said, well, I'm not doing live interviews. We're not live right now. I just want to record the artists. Oh, well, no, I think you're live. You can't do this. Meantime, right next to me is E! Entertainment Television doing live interviews. The other side of me is MTV doing live interviews. Long story short, they kicked me out. They kicked me out. So I'm back in my hotel room before the telecast that you see on TV even starts. And I call Chris, and you remember Chris, he's like, "Buddy," like, yeah, I'm already back in the hotel room, Chris. They kicked me out. But I got Celine Dion and Gloria Estefan, so he was happy about that.
Those places, they're just crazy.
What else?
These things.
At Ben FM, and you'll love this, as a father, when your daughter was little, did she like the Wiggles?
I think somewhat. Yeah.
So my kids loved the Wiggles. Ben FM was the sponsor of a Wiggles show in Trenton. At I don't know what it's called now, but at the time it was the Sovereign Bank Arena. I don't know what that arena is called now. Yeah. So I reached out to like one of the arena executives, like, "Hey, my radio station," and we were doing a meet and greet. So look, my listeners from my station are meeting up with the Wiggles anyway backstage. Do you mind if I tag along with my family? And they let me. So my kids got to meet the Wiggles. I was like Father of the Year. It was great.
Yeah. Hey. We have to take advantage of these things when you're on the air or.
And I'll tell you what, one of the coolest things ever was, they every year, and obviously they didn't last year because of the pandemic, but every year the Phillies have that media softball game. It's like radio versus TV. So I only took part once. It was in, I think, 2016, and luckily somebody, I gave my phone to somebody, so I have video of it. I was in the game. I got a hit. Now, nice. I'm not athletic at all, okay? Dan, you know me. You've known me a long time. I have no athletic talent whatsoever. But I got a hit, and I was safe at first base. And anybody who's a baseball fan, I don't care how old you are, everybody has dreamed of hearing your name being announced on the loudspeaker at the stadium with your face on the Jumbotron, walking up to home plate, and getting a hit. And I did. So it's like that was pretty cool.
Now, didn't you come, if I remember correctly, didn't you come with me to Vet Stadium? We played softball, because weren't we in the outfield and there were all these burn marks, and we're like to the people at Vet Stadium, "Where are these burn marks?" "Oh, that's from Lenny Dykstra. It's
you know what?
All the tobacco."
That was, I think it was 96, because they gave us a bunch of All-Star Game stuff, and the All-Star Game was at the Vet in 96. Yeah. You know what's funny, Dan? I have a picture from that day, but I don't remember much about it.
Yeah, I just remember us being in the outfield, and we asked that question, like, "What's all these burn marks?" Lenny Dykstra spitting his tobacco.
Oh, that was a cool moment. I got to interview Lenny Dykstra when he was promoting his book like 2 years ago. And he was going around to the stations, radio and TV in Philly. He came to Channel 17, and and I have this on tape too. It was pre-recorded because it's Lenny Dykstra. We didn't do it live. Pre-recorded.
Sure.
So we did it like after the newscast one morning, and we wrap up, and as the camera goes black, but the mics are still up, you hear Lenny say to me, "Hey man, you're pretty smooth, dude." I'm like, "Yeah, Lenny said I'm smooth. Cool." Nice. That's neat.
Very nice. Now, you were at B101 in 1998, right?
Yeah, gosh, I was there from December of 94 to August of 2006.
So do you remember 35th anniversary, we're at what's the hotel in Center City, Philadelphia, and Hall and Oates played for 500 people. We were down there. It was Chris and JJ, me,
I must have
Roland,
missed that because I don't remember that.
Maybe you had to be on the air.
That might have been it. Maybe I was on the air.
We were there, and Hall and Oates was playing, and I'll never forget this. So it was 500 people. It was people who the salespeople invited, so their clients. And I think Hall and Oates comes out, and they just had this look on their face like, why are we doing this show?
Really?
Because everyone, as soon as they started doing Rich Girl, everyone got into it, and then they fed off that. It was fun. But it was interesting that I got to introduce them three times. Hall and Oates, yeah, to do different shows. So you got to take advantage of these times.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. It's radio's been, and radio and TV has been very good to me. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, and you and I have talked about this, and we could talk about this all night. I don't really like the direction the business is going, but I still love radio, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's in our blood.
Totally.
What can we do? I thought you were going to tell the story of when I was training you and the woman I was with at the time. She comes to the radio station in my trench coat, nothing else underneath.
I didn't.
And you're like, "What's going on? Is this a regular thing?"
Yeah, I didn't want to throw you under the bus like that, but since you brought it up, no. Here's what I remember about that. Okay, you're training me. It might have been my first shift because before I started on that Saturday, I think I did like a Tuesday night from 11 to midnight. And then I did like that Friday night from 11 to midnight to train. And it might have been my first night. And I'm looking to find you because I have a question. And I see you in the jock lounge making out with your girlfriend. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.
Again, you got to take advantage of these.
You got to take advantage.
You're on the air doing everything, and I trained you. I felt confident to leave you alone and do all that. And
serves you right for feeling confident. You shouldn't have done that.
Stop. We had a lot of fun. So my last question is, and I think I know the answer because you kind of touched upon it, was how do you feel, because I call this a radio community, and it is getting smaller, and people know everybody else, and you've heard names, and whether it's local, around the country, what have you, how do you feel that you were a part of it?
What do you mean? What do you mean, how do I...
So what's your thought of being, you were part of the radio community, and I know you, if you get an opportunity, you would still, you still are part of the radio community. You're doing traffic reports.
Listen.
But if you could jock once again.
Listen, I miss talking about music. I mean, it's like you said, it's in our blood. I have always said that radio is my first love. And it always has been. I mean, what attracted me to broadcasting was listening to the radio. I mean, it was mainly sports, but listening to guys like Harry Callis and Merrill Reese and Gene Hart, they were coming out of my radio. And the radio station I listened to growing up, and it's funny, they were only on the air for 6 years, but man, did they make an impact. WCAU-FM 98 now. Guys like Terry Young and Glenn Kalina and I'm drawing a blank now, Barsky and Rich Hawkins, Christy Springfield, I would listen to them on the radio, and I wanted to do that. And I'll tell you something else, okay? And I don't know how much time you have, Dan, but so you might remember this. Down the shore, years ago in Atlantic City, WAYV, okay, 95.1, they had studios right on the boardwalk, okay? And looking back, I feel bad for the DJ on the air. I would not want to be this guy, but the window, you could look into the air studio. You could watch from the boardwalk. You could watch the DJ on the air, And I used to just go and stare because my family spent a lot of time in Atlantic City when I was a kid. And I used to go, like in the summer, every day. I would just go stare at these people on the radio. And that's what I wanted to do.
Well, didn't they have drapes? they had drapes that I think that
I think
would
they had
close
blinds, yeah. And
yeah, or
sometimes
something
they
like
were
that.
closed, but other times they were open. And I used to love watching the guy on the air.
Yeah, I think that was one of the mistakes of that company, or I don't know who made the decision. Like, let's not have our studios there
What?
anymore
It,
because, especially in the summer, it draws
sure, it does.
attention, and you could probably today you could have the sponsor's name above that area of
Well,
the studio, and people would see thousands of people a day would see the sponsor, XYZ company, and you could also probably have product
sure.
placement now if you had that. You could do
But
so many
they
things
weren't that
today.
forward thinking, and the reason they moved was because look, it's a property on the boardwalk. Basically it's a storefront on the boardwalk. It's a lot of money, but like you said, they could have sold advertising to probably pay for that.
But maybe just the whatever the rent was high in the summer, in the late fall into the
Well, that's
winter.
true.
It
Yeah,
wasn't that high. It couldn't have
that's a
been
good
that
point.
high at all. I mean, if I were that company now, I would try to get back onto the boardwalk, and you could do all the things I just said and make
Well,
tons of money. And I'm not even a salesperson. The salespeople who are watching right now, you're probably saying, Dan, you haven't even touched
there
upon
you
what we
go.
could do.
But yeah, no, but that made a
So,
huge impact on me. So to answer your question in my usual long-winded way, I've always loved radio, and I've always loved being a part of radio. And even the few times in my career when I wasn't on for a while, I still always felt like I was a part of it. And yeah, I miss talking about music. I know you do too. It's fun. Radio is fun.
absolutely. And I still think they may have done this concept, but just do a show like behind the scenes between the records. When you just said Harry Callis and Merrill Reese, I did my terrible impressions and made you laugh, doing them talking about the long fly ball, Jason Lay, home run, Lay, unbelievable. And things like that. That's my
Not
best Harry
bad. Not
Callis.
bad.
So
I've been working on a
that'd be
Harry
good.
too. Here's a drive to deep left field. It's out of here. I got to work on it.
Yeah. What is Nails do? What's coming from his mouth? He's spitting out tobacco.
Oh, the best was Harry Callis and Richie Ashburn together. I mean, come on, how great were they?
Yeah. Oh my God. Unbelievable. You've heard the story of them being in the bar in New York City. It's I don't know if it's been stretched into a tall tale of where Harry and Whitey are in the bar, and it was a bit of a shady bar, and then the lady of the evening, I'll call her
Okay.
that, comes up and says, starts pricing, I'll do this for this price, that price, and then I think it was between a Twilight doubleheader, and they're like, how much does it cost for you to do the second game of the doubleheader?
I remember that. Yeah, or the pregame show or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's looking like, what are you talking
Oh,
about?
they had some great
So,
moments
yeah.
on the air. The best was when Harry Callis was talking to Richie about how superstitious players are. If you have a bat that you do well with, like you guard that bat with your life because you're superstitious. So Ashburn says something like, "Oh yeah, players used to guard bats all the time. If you had a bat that you did well with, you would sleep with that bat." Then he says, "Come to think of it, I slept with a lot of old bats back in my day."
Oh, jeez. Well, you mentioned L.A. and Fransky and L.A. kind of have that back and forth patter.
You know what's
also
funny?
on the radio, and
And,
they're great
and
together.
in the Legends of Philly that I just did, which is hopefully going to be posted in the next couple of weeks, I said that to him. I said, to me, Fransky and L.A. are Harry and Whitey 2.0. They are Harry and Larry appreciated that, but he kind of shies away from that comparison because look, Harry and Richie were immortal.
But Fransky and L.A. just make it
Right.
fun, and they paint the picture, and just the dry humor and joking around.
Well,
especially
You know what?
tough
Well, you
seasons.
know what? You know what I love about them, and I said this to Larry, and this is the mark of a good broadcaster. I think. I said when you listen to the two of you guys do a game, I mean, not to be cliche, but it's like it's two friends of yours just talking about what's going on, and their voices just happen to be coming out of the radio. I mean, that's to me. That's what makes a guy like you so good on the air. What makes a guy like Chris McCoy so good on the air, because it really is like listening to you guys. It's like I'm driving along, but you're in the seat next to me. You know what I mean? And that to me, that's the mark of a good broadcaster. When you can come through the radio like that and make that connection, those guys do. You do. Chris McCoy does. Not a lot of people can do it.
Well, I left my wallet in the other room, so I got to send you some money.
I'll take a check. I'll take a check.
I'll Venmo you or PayPal you. Later.
I'm not high tech. I don't know what Venmo is.
Jason Lee, well, I was going to call it the WB17, Channel 17, PHL 17. Mornings, you could see him doing traffic. Sometimes you could see him doing weather, or he's behind the scenes, and
they got me doing a bit of everything there. So it's pretty cool.
And then also traffic reports. Now, on the you were doing weekends where it was local. You were doing some local stations, but now you're doing some stuff in the afternoon from stations.
Yeah. So occasionally I'll fill in on weekends, and it's usually all the iHeart stations and a couple stations down the shore. My normal Monday through Friday, WURD AM, Classics 107.9, which I love. I think that's great. I love that station. And then a bunch of stations in Harrisburg and Lancaster. And that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's fun, and you're right. Everyone watching right now, whether you're an on-air person, radio, TV, or you're behind the scenes and you are sales, you know the fun that we've had off the air and just the relationships we made. And hopefully one of these days, maybe a B101 reunion, celebrating something before we all get too old.
I would love a B101 reunion. There were a lot of good people there, Dan. I would love a reunion. And before we wrap this up, I want everybody watching this to know what a special guy you are. Because, again, like I said, you trained me at B101. You put me, you kind of started me off on the right foot. And you can't put a price tag on that. And you've been a great friend for the past 25-plus years. And, you're a good dude. I love you, buddy. I really do.
Thanks. Love you back. I appreciate you being on. You're a talented
guy. Back at you.
And it's always fun to talk to you about stuff. And we could go on.
We could.
My daughter edits all this stuff, so she's probably going to be like, Dad, it was so long.
You know what's funny? And Abby, forgive me. I know I'm making this even worse for you to edit. But my Legends of Philly, my son edits them. Isn't that cool when you can do a project like that with your kid? How old's Abby now?
Abby's 21.
Oh, my God. She's 21. Oh, my God.
Yeah. You know that, I took her to the radio station all the time with me on the weekends. And I think that she never wanted to be on the air. She's not a ham like me. But I think she just saw the computers and editing things. But she knows how to video edit. I don't know how to video edit. So I think I started her off into that avenue. And then she just learn how to do the video.
Well, you know what's great about that, and it's the same thing with my son, Ethan. Your daughter and my son are both smart enough to not want to get involved in the on-air part of. I'm kidding.
No, well, because
there's more job security in what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. They always need editors. I don't think you could teach a machine to edit because that human component's not there, and when you could pick up some things and just put it together just right, I don't know, that would be very difficult to kind of program that into a computer. So that's awesome. Well, congratulations on your success. Continued success. Listen for Jason's voice on the airwaves around the area, and also watch him on PHL 17. Jay,
thank you, Dan. Always a pleasure. Good to talk to you.
You too.